Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. There's free cream teas out there that you're missing. No, I'm kidding. Don't go away. My name's Charles Miller. I'm a journalist. I've been covering this area for about 5 years. And I'm not a technologist, even though we are getting into a little bit of technology today. But the importance of what we're talking about is who you can trust and who is responsible for the blockchain that your business might choose to use. And we've got the perfect panel to answer that question with a range of different backgrounds. So please, would you welcome our panel? So I'd like to introduce Kevin Alkema, who is the CEO of Bitcoin Miner Sales in Vancouver and also the Director of Hosting at GorillaPool. And Jake Campton is Communications Director of VeChain, which has its own Thor blockchain. And at the end, Greg Ward, who's an entrepreneur and developer with Smartledger, which uses the BSV blockchain. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Charles.
Now, before we start, let's just go back to basics here. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that all blockchains add transactions to create blocks, and the blockchain gets longer as that goes on, and identical copies of the blockchain have to be kept on a network of computers. And the important thing for us today is that that network needs to be kept in sync so that all the computers have the same exact blockchain as all the others. And the mechanism that allows that to happen is what we're talking about today, and we can talk about them trying to achieve consensus. And so these consensus mechanisms that exist are one of the differences between different blockchains, and there are 3 that we're talking about today, called proof of work, proof of stake, and proof of authority, and each has its own supporters. So introducing this subject, I'm going to ask Greg, first of all, to be the advocate for proof of work, which is used by Bitcoin. So, Greg, how would you make proof of work simple for people to understand if they haven't come across it?
Sure. Proof of work is what the original Bitcoin white paper was built upon as a consensus mechanism. When Bitcoin first was launched, we needed a way to be able to reliably, to have a trustless system that we could rely upon as a protocol, to where I didn't have to trust necessarily the miner over here or the miner over here, but rather there was this idea of you're putting in CPU power, or you're investing into CPU power to basically show that you have an investment in the technology and in the network. So proof of work first starts with that, to say I'm going to create a hashing, right? So I'm going to almost taking a random number out of a hat, but each ability to pull it out is a CPU cycle, right? Or some infrastructure that you're building to create that, saying I'm participating. In the meantime, you're also validating transactions and you're propagating it to the rest of the network. The proof of work says that when I find this random number, I have the ability to place this block on the blockchain, and all the transactions fingerprint matches at the top with a fingerprint that is called a hash header, and that hash header should be the same across all other nodes. So we're able to see when somebody wins that block. It might be, Kevin in another country. If he wins that block and he places that block on the chain, I can compare against my hash header and know that it's accurate. I don't have to rely upon Kevin specifically.
So in proof of work, the work is the electricity used and the infrastructure that you have to invest in. And when we come to proof of stake, there are different factors, but there's also investment. So, Kevin, just give us an outline. I know you're actually a proof of work guy, but for the purposes of this, just give us a little quick idea of proof of stake, if you would.
Sure. The main difference would be that consensus mechanism in proof of stake is done by way of validators, and those validators will validate the transactions. In a proof-of-stake system, validators tend to be, the individuals, let's say, that have the most funds or staked coin within that ecosystem. And the reason for that is then they're incentivized to have their interests aligned with the ecosystem or the blockchain that they're a part of. So you have just a slightly different approach to how transactions are validated, and it's not done necessarily by the proof of work, which would be the brute force of computational power.
So the stake that we're talking about in proof of stake is the commitment or the amount of the coin itself that network owner has purchased, and therefore they've got more clout and are more likely to be able to validate the next block that comes along. Is that?
Yeah, I would say that, and also they're incentivized to be honest, if you will, because their interests theoretically are aligned.
They've got a stake in the network.
They've got skin in the game, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so Jake, let's talk about proof of authority. VeChain, your blockchain actually uses that. It's more unusual probably than the other two, so perhaps you could give us a quick idea of proof of authority.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the key differentiators of the proof of authority consensus, there's no competitive elements. So like in a proof of work, you're obviously using computational power to compete for blocks. Proof of stake, it's about leveraging your stake for kind of greater share of the kind of mine, the pool and whatnot. In a proof of authority blockchain, you have KYC'd nodes, which
know your customer.
Yeah. So there's this kind of vetting process which happens initially. So it's kind of commonly associated with private blockchains, but VeChain, because we operate in a quite business-focused environment initially, went for that particular model because it's kind of meeting the kind of compliance expectations of these enterprises who want to see. Essentially, they want to know who is running the nodes in the first place. So the key differentiator here is there's no competition within this pool of block producers. There's 101 of them, dispersed globally. There's, essentially, these guys aren't competing. So it's a randomizing algorithm. They get to produce the next block if they're selected. They get the block reward, etc.
So each one of them is equally likely to win the next block. Is that right?
Yeah, and then on top of that, you've got thousands of community-run kind of governance nodes, but the actual core block production is done by a more smaller pool.
As I was saying, I think proof of authority is less known than proof of work and proof of stake.
Yeah.
Is proof of authority in some sense a kind of proof of stake, or is it just an unusual third option?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a permutation in a sense. There is a state required to run the node. So, some of our authority nodes, they have to hold a minimum balance, but there's no increase in likeliness to, get the block reward from having more vet in your pool. So in that sense, it's kind of, but also not, it's fundamental difference.
So let me invite you to criticize your fellow panelists who are both really in the proof of work camp. What is the advantage of proof of authority over the proof of work, or what is your objection to proof of work?
I think they've each served their own function, but for us in our particular environment, we operate quite in an enterprise world. So when they look to adopt blockchain, especially in Europe right now, ESG, sustainability, that kind of stuff is being mandated and brought in at a kind of regulatory level. So by having 101 nodes actually running the network, we have a very low energy footprint, which is a kind of key requisite step in Europe. I don't know what the landscape's like in America, but that's quite a big advantage.
Yeah, energy usage is one of the most common criticisms of proof of work. Greg, what is your line on the huge amount of electricity used?
I think that there's been a misunderstanding in where we began with blockchain with the Bitcoin white paper, and when it first started beginning, Satoshi put a 1 megabyte block cap in order to avoid spamming of transactions on the network and to allow it to grow to a more robust infrastructure. We saw that this was never removed, right? And it was due to what some people would call conspiracy within the Bitcoin core developers to maintain this small block size. It could be based upon miners who see it's more profitable to have a replace by fee or a small amount of seats available on the train. I like to use this analogy a lot. If we have a train going from here to Brixton, and I can only fit 7 people in it, and it costs this much energy to get from here to Brixton, well, then I have to charge that much per person jumping on the train, and each person is taking up that much of that slice of energy to get them from A to B. It could be the most secure infrastructure to get someone from A to B, but if you don't have the ability to scale, then what's the point if you're not actually having an efficient mechanism to actually save people money and produce a more reliable, scalable enterprise network for the globe to use? If you have an unbounded block size that scales as the network increases, like we have with BSV, then you start to see with something like a Terra node, where we have lower carbon footprint than Visa, but yet the robustness of reliability of integrity of data that you would need for a global ledger. And so that's my take on it.
I mean, I think that, let me pass this to Kevin. I mean, that argument in favor of the proof of work system depends on a huge number of transactions taking place, and that there is a real utility to those transactions, doesn't it? I mean, I'm slightly worried that that may well be the case, but unless it's actually replacing energy that would be used instead of those transactions, then we're still adding to the amount of energy being used. I mean, energy per transaction isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all.
Good point, Charles. I think one of the things we're finding with GorillaPool, with the customers that we deal with, and the conversations that I have every day, is that we live in a world and an economy where up until really the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, 10 years, I mean, people were mining Bitcoin with CPUs, and so that was all fine and good, but now...
That's just the kind of processor you could have for your own computer at home.
And now it takes very specialized, what are known as ASIC miners, and they consume a lot of energy, you know, and per the criticism of, you know, the carbon footprint. But to Greg's point, if we believe in and have a philosophical view in you know, a different world that we tokenize all kinds of assets, we're going to need bigger blocks. We're going to need something that can scale, and we're going to need a system that is incentivized to actually do hard work and massive amounts of transactions, and in a decentralized manner. And but circling back to the energy point, there's so many situations, jurisdictions in North America where I work, where there's just unused energy, and whether it's trapped natural gas, whether it's offsets from greenhouses, whether it's biodigesters on dairy farms, you know, things are changing very fast, and the dialogue that I'm hearing out there is, you know, what can we do with this unused energy?
So all energy is not equal, really, in that sense. But Jake, what in terms of scaling, that seems to be the big potential for proof of work. How scalable is your proof of authority system?
Yeah, again, this is one of the advantages of the protocol, because it's quite, I guess you could say, streamlined at the core. It's able to be very scalable. Like if you need to make an upgrade across a consensus, you know, I know it's slight anathema to some in terms of how, I guess, you know, there's this degree of centralization, but if there is an upgrade, you know, because of this process that our nodes, the authority nodes have to go through, like, if there is like an upgrade that needs to take place, they basically have to do it. That's just part of the terms, you know. So there's this very quick kind of ability to respond to the demands of the network. And because, you know, they're running their own nodes and whatnot, if you need a server upgrade, it's essentially just a case of you have to upgrade to meet the needs as you go. This is kind of just, you know,
because you have some sort of, is it a committee or some sort of group of people who are administering the network and making decisions about those kind of things?
Yeah, so this is where our kind of decentralization element comes in. We have thousands of community nodes that basically vote on governance events, and then we have this steering committee that the community votes in. So every 2 years there's an election, they get voted in, they sit on the council for 2 years, and essentially they just, when these node applications come in, it's not like they necessarily vet very hard. It's a case of, you have the requisite kind of needs, you'll get put on the waiting list until someone drops off. So it's a kind of one in, one out system of people falling in and out as time goes by.
But let me go to Greg then. I mean, the whole thing about the sort of theory behind proof of work is that sort of in a way there's nobody in charge. It's set in stone, it runs itself. Does the kind of thing that Jake was describing there, does that make you worried at all about the way in which the governance of that kind of a blockchain would work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you have a small world network of a community that, again, you're relying upon, let's say you're within a certain jurisdiction alone, right? The City of London, and you have stakeholders who are participating in a legal jurisdiction with legal contracts bound to each other to not commit fraud upon each other, or to maintain a database and not commit fraud. I think that the legal realm completely ties into, same thing with proof of work, right? You're going to have a footprint. They're going to know who you are if you're in a legal jurisdiction that, you're recognized as an entity. And so you could be charged with fraud for messing with the blockchain. But you're also going to lose a tremendous amount of money by producing fraudulent blocks. As a global ledger, it certainly concerns me, right? We have plenty of places where people are legally bound to produce an outcome for the benefit of people, and it turns out it's a Bernie Madoff situation. It turns out it's a collusion of conspirators that were trustworthy in the beginning and no longer, for whatever reason, they got together and colluded. I think, interestingly, so I think that both within BSV, we have proof of work that secures a certain amount, but there's also legal ramifications if you provide a node service on BSV and you are producing fraudulent transactions and blocks and you're known. I think with proof of authority and what Jake has, I think there's actually an incredible synergy that we could have as an example, rather than Jake having to run a global network and ledger. What you're able to do is do checkpoints of Jake's system on the blockchain, and you're able to tie these two things together. Because remember, blockchain, for those of us in BSV, and if you saw some of the other panels, it's TCP, it's the underlying foundation, it's the new internet. It's not just a token system or something for a Bank of America and Walmart alone to use, or what. It is a global underlying foundation of technology. So we don't want AOL and Prodigy again. Mm-hmm. We want to have the internet. We want the new Web3 that proof of authority could run upon, and these different other systems, but we have to have a global
So you're sort of suggesting an interesting synergy between the two systems.
Well, because, remember, if you have
but he doesn't,
what
he
seems
doesn't
like a
need
private
that. He's
relationship.
perfectly happy with being on his own, I think.
What was that?
You don't. I don't think you feel the need to be sort of tied into a proof of work system.
No, but I think, it's not also a case of one protocol is going to run everything, I don't think. I mean, everything's got their pitfalls, like decentralization maximalists will look at what I'm talking about and probably be like, that's disgusting. But, for our needs, it's perfectly suited. So, what you're describing sounds like we do have some overlap as well. So it's like proof of work hybrid.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of room for what we're calling the global public ledger and other interoperable systems to benefit from this, right? We're providing, again, we had IPv6 discussions where we're saying you need to have this 1.5 million transactions and above to be able to compete and unite with IPv6, with IoT and all the Internet of Things. And you pointed out before, Charles, whose transactions are worthwhile, whose aren't, right? Well, who's to say? If you're paying and you're using this global ledger, what today might be a cat photo, tomorrow might be a cat photo by one of the most famous people in the world and worth something, right? So what today's spam transactions to some might be tomorrow's wonderful assets.
Kevin?
I just want to add a little bit to that. I think just from a philosophical perspective, we've come, blockchains, the initiation of them, et cetera, they've been around for a while, and then the Satoshi white paper came out where proof of work was maybe or is somewhat of a dehumanized way. It's a physical barrier to validate transactions in a very mechanical, non-emotional way, whereas proof of stake and others, non-proof of work, are a little bit back to, and Greg touched on it a little bit with the Bertie Madoff reference, but that human element. So, we're wrestling through and wrestling with economic systems that need to represent appropriately the self-interest of participating parties. But I think what everybody ideally wants is something that can work in such a way that we reduce the corrupt self-interest transactions that take place on any system. And so even that's a bit of certainly a bit of a philosophical angle to it. I think they're valid questions to constantly be asking ourselves in terms of, if I'm building a product, what do I want that to be built on, and who's involved, and what form of governance is in place, and it's very hard to see, around the corner down the road, but that's part of the purpose of the white paper, was to try to outline some of these things and remove some of that, ideally mitigate the risk, I guess, associated with, corrupt approaches to some of this stuff.
I'd like to just start again, Jake, with some of the sort of practicalities, because your business, I was quite sort of surprised through my own ignorance, I suppose, that it's been going since 2018.
2015, it started.
2015, sorry.
That was a private form.
And you have all sorts of deals going, including with Walmart, you mentioned. Can you just talk to me a little bit about how you interact with these big businesses and the kind of conversations that you might have about security and the responsibility of the blockchain, which presumably come up while you're trying to get that kind of work from big companies like that?
Yeah, obviously, a lot of these discussions around, compliance and regulation come in. So, like, for them, having this known validator set. For instance, the Walmart contract came about through our relationship with PwC. So PwC actually kind of closed a deal and consulted Walmart on that.
And what does the Walmart deal actually sort of consist of?
So it's a thing called the Food Traceability Platform. Pretty dull name, but essentially it's a kind of farm-to-fork supply chain management process. So Walmart can essentially see everything in real time throughout supply chains. And it's Asia-specific, this operation. But yeah, they can potentially, if you want to go that granular, look at a lettuce, look at the humidity of a lettuce in a field in Malaysia, or, well, not in a field, but you know what I mean, in a greenhouse, for example. But yeah, it gives you a lot of granularity and real-time oversight of supply chain. So in that instance, food safety in Asia is a big problem and a recurring issue. So for them, benefits were, say a product got contaminated, they could then know the exact batch down to the exact lettuces.
Right. And so presumably they like the fact that they can talk to the people behind the actual blockchain. Yeah,
that's a big thing. That's a big part of it, for sure. Having someone you can consult, obviously, VeChain's always kind of described itself as semi-decentralized, because you do have this decentralized network, but you also do have this element of centrality where, yeah, they can come talk to team members. There's, BD and consulting, and there's all that kind of stuff on the side.
Because I want to just throw that to Kevin. I'm sorry, to Kevin, and just ask. We talk about the sort of the beauty of the proof of work model in that sort of it's trustless, but businesses may want somebody to know who they're dealing with, and the idea of this sort of system that just runs itself may not be such a selling point.
Right. There are new companies in the BSV space that are starting to tackle some of these challenges and develop products that, my background is, that resonates with me. What was just mentioned, I have a corporate background in the medical device world, and yeah, at the end of the day, people want to talk to people. But that being said, I do see innovation in the proof of work space in the BSV economy that is, real people developing real products and tokenizing all kinds of things.
So there's always got to be somebody to deal with, even if the underlying blockchain is, quote, set in stone.
Yeah.
Greg, what's been your experience with Smartledger? Because you deal with customers and you have to explain everything to them. what comes up in relation to these kind of issues for you?
No, it's a great question. Our experience has been varied. The global public ledger allows those who want to show proof of some kind of activity by being able to show that this hash or this activity happened. They're able to show somebody across the waters that this play that happened on a music app actually occurred, and we could verify this through a global public ledger. I think, again, I want to go back to this idea of TCP/IP or the underlying architecture, because we're not looking necessarily for the CEO of Internet, right? We're not looking for the CEO of TCP/IP. We're looking for the CEO of somebody who's able to take these tools of technology and provide the most abstracted away, beneficial system for the people. And so it could be a private use of a public ledger, no different than people are using private uses of the roadways to bring in food to Walmart, or whether it be the use of the internet to provide services. If we're really looking at it as a global public ledger, then we're able to create private businesses like Ticketmint or CertaHash, where we're able to protect users' private data. We're able to firewall identity, but we're still able to verify in a trustless manner whatever hashing, whatever data we need. So it's been 99%, 100%, 99% great, and then 1% in various jurisdictions. You start to hear data sovereignty and some of these things where you have jurisdictional needs to have protection of their own data within their own confined places. Smartledger's been exploring producing solutions for this very thing, which again is similar to the proof of authority model, but what you're able to do is have a business management system utilizing blockchain technology, but you still have this global public ledger that allows you to checkpoint and have interoperability across jurisdictions.
Kevin, your sort of perspective on this is slightly different, because with GorillaPool and Bitcoin miner sales, you are actually selling the mining equipment to customers.
Yeah.
I mean, what sort of issues come up there, and what's your feeling about these people who are choosing to invest in maintaining the network for reward?
It's been very interesting over the last, I'd say, 2.5 years. The more I came to understand proof of work during that time, I've been in the position to really witness it firsthand. Both the BTC and the BSV networks, ecosystems experienced the halving. And essentially, like with proof of work, it really is the most efficient. There's this level of, Greg brought up the term co-opetition, so to speak, but it really starts from the manufacturers, and there's two major manufacturers primarily. They're located in Asia, but they're competing against each other for the most efficient machines. It's a very elegant system in terms of that block reward and how that actually works in real time every single day. But you move from the manufacturers and how efficient the machines are, then you move down to the hosting facilities, or also called co-location facilities or data centers. So what's the cost of their power? How well are they run? What's their uptime, meaning how are they connected 100% of the time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year? Do they have curtailment due to cold weather in cold climates like Quebec or Kazakhstan? And then you take that proof of work and that competitive aspect of securing data in the most economical manner possible, then you move down to the actual individuals or businesses that purchase miners. And so firsthand at the halving, anybody with a miner that was maybe manufactured 5 to 7 years ago, and the power of an ASIC miner is measured in terahash, so anything 80 terahash or lower might not be profitable. So they actually get unplugged by the network, and the most efficient, latest and greatest keep chugging along, keep securing the network. And so you have this innovation edge that is constantly at play and you don't have policies necessarily dictating what's securing the network.
It's sort of a survival of the fittest kind of mechanism. But the downside of that is it's a sort of a huge waste because stuff is being chucked out the whole time. And so the justification is that everything is kept up to the latest level of technology. But Jake, do you have any comment on that system, which you might look at as a wonderful self-regulating system that gets better all the time, but maybe you don't have that view of it?
I mean, obviously, we've gone at our architecture with this idea of sustainability. So, keeping the core protocol in this kind of smaller fashion, kind of more modular and scalable, no competition. That meets our needs. I'm not, going to bash other consensus in that sense, but. Yeah, for us, I mean, we don't need to do that, which again is appealing for companies like BCG that we work with now on the sustainability, ESG stuff that they want to push ahead. Like, they have to tell that story to their clients, before they start. So it's like, well, why would we want to use VeChain that you're presenting to us? Having those things in place of how we've been considering that obviously goes a long way. So. Yeah, for us, that we don't have to deal with that kind of thing, and it does lend to our narrative in this current kind of regulatory climate.
It sounds like you've got a sort of pretty autonomous setup, and the kind of political, with a small p, debates that happen around the proof of work system, you just don't sort of have to think about that sort of thing, I suppose.
No, and that was actually, going back to when we launched mainnet, which was 2017, we had a public mainnet launch on Ethereum. We'd already been doing stuff for a couple of years before that with like Group Renault, Microsoft, different kind of companies. Before we went to mainnet, there was a big survey done with PwC amongst enterprises, like, okay, what are your needs, what are your demands, what do you and don't you want from a public blockchain? So that was a really considered approach to actually how the protocol was even launched. So this stuff all came from that, essentially. It was, a lot of talking with CEOs and businesses. Right.
So it really was designed for their needs.
Yeah, I mean, it's purpose-built. Like,
right.
I won't bore you with all the features now. We've only got 10 minutes left, but,
Let me ask Greg and Kevin then, is there anything about that kind of appeals to you that you don't have in your world?
In regards to what?
In regards to the autonomy of, having the whole system kind of under your control and running the business from sort of blockchain right through to dealing with Walmart.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as an application developer, as a distribution company, we do actually have those relationships, right? So we are able to take this technology and really, honestly, more than ever today and this year, it's always progressing further and further with Terranode and these things. The conversations we're able to interact with the likes of Walmart and some of these different other companies, they're very receptive. They can talk to us. We have a CEO, and we're able to build solutions that don't rely upon just us as a company, but we have tremendous application developers and technologies, S-Script and Project Babbage, and so people have contributors of genius level coming from all sorts of angles. So we have that as well as the abilities as an individual company. Is it? I ran my own blockchain. At home. Back in 2017. So we could all do this. I'm certainly happy to see a business making use of the technology. So yeah, being agile in business is certainly always nice. Being able to direct all your movements, certainly nice. But I think that it depends on what the end user is looking for, what you're looking to give to them, and what it is that the definition of a blockchain even is.
Right. I guess it's sort of a bit on your side of the argument. You might be sort of saying, well, we don't all need our own internet. We can all work on the internet.
Well, not to, I'll just 30 more seconds. My colleague and co-founder, Brian Doherty, he oftentimes likes to say, anything worthwhile requires a little bit of energy or maybe a little bit more energy to secure, right? The airline industry is 3% of the world's global CO2 levels, I believe. Bitcoin, BTC, which obviously is 7 transactions a second, we feel is very inefficient, but even only that is 0.03% or whatever of the global CO2 levels. But we're fine with airline travel, right? We're fine with protecting the president or the king or the queen, right? By putting energy out to protect those most valuable assets of ours, whether it be, I want to make sure that not just somebody legally attests to the fact that I did something to keep this plane up to par with the latest technologies, but I actually want to show some proof of work that they're invested in it, that this company is continually investing in new technologies.
Okay, we haven't got a proof of stake person here, but we've got proof of authority and proof of work. And I'd like to ask the audience, if you are an entrepreneur and you want to make use of blockchain in your business in a way you've never done before, I'm going to offer you the choice of proof of authority or proof of work. If you just had to pick one, how many of you would go with the proof of work system? Yep, pretty good. And how many like the idea of Jake's proof of authority system? Yeah, I would say there's a fair smattering of, what would you say, maybe like a quarter for proof of authority, 3/4 for proof of work. And I think it's probably it's a little unfair because it's not a scientifically, demographically balanced audience by any means. But okay, so let's just talk about the question of how you move these systems forward, and really, in a way, what you need people to understand. I mean, Jake, from your point of view, is the kind of explaining of what your system does and how it works, how important is that? Do people want to know all about it, or do they just say, well, just explain to me what you can do for me?
In terms of when we approach enterprise, or you like to a room of people?
Yeah, exactly. If you're in the boardroom with the CEO and you're trying to get the deal. Yeah,
I think there's dual edges, because sometimes it's a case of like who you know as well, right? So if someone knows someone, and they may look upon that more favorably.
That's just business for you, I think, yes.
Very true, but of course they do want to know, what you're working with, and also the business case. Like, I keep going to business.
Does anybody ever say, oh, well, I like the idea, but it's a shame you're not on proof of work blockchain?
I've never personally heard that. I mean, ultimately, for the business mind, it boils down to cost, right?
Yeah,
basically. Right. Can you forecast costs? How much is it going to cost me next time frame? What kind of scalability have you got? How many, all that kind of very basal data. Like Walmart recently did 2 million transactions in a day. That's fine. They needed to do that. They could do that. There was a set fee. Boom, done. That's all they want to know ultimately. And then for the European markets, I think the ESG sustainability things that are coming in, that's now factored in quite a lot. So we work with Boston Consulting Group. That's kind of their MO, is getting businesses in that direction. So as well as the supply chain stuff, it's Scope 3 emissions, ethical sourcing of products, blah blah blah. So yeah, then having the network, when you can tell this story of we're clean and green and all that stuff, actually does go a long way. So it does matter in some conversations.
Right. Kevin, from your point of view, you're interesting people who want to get involved in the mining business, really. How much are they interested in this kind of question? Or not? Presumably they just want to know how much money they're going to make.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, if it's my wife, she doesn't care. No, but joking aside, with our customer base, and it's everything from individual investors to businesses, LLCs, et cetera, that buy a fleet of miners. They're definitely interested where it's all going. Where is this tokenized economy coming, and where is it going, and can the hardware I'm investing in, can it handle that, and will I be ready for that? And so those are the types of conversations I inevitably have with a lot of.
Do you have to explain what proof of work is and how it works, or is that a level of detail they don't need to?
No, I might have been asked that once or twice last year. They definitely want to know how the BSV blockchain works. They want to understand how tokenization works. They want to understand how an ASIC performs what it does within that equation. And so there's always a bit of an education process that goes along with that. So.
Greg, what about, I know Smartledger describes itself as a technology distribution company, right? So that means you are not only coming up with and using different bits of technology yourself, but always talking to customers about it. what's your version of those kind of conversations?
There has not been a tremendous amount of people that have come up to us and say, we want proof of stake over proof of work. We've definitely had a funny story is we had a group come up to us about 3 years ago. We want to make NFTs. We don't care which chain it is. We don't care if it exists in 6 months. We just build this platform. We want to make some money now and get out. We don't care if it could. And I think that's a big problem that you run into within some of that space is, first, longevity, scalability, all these things. So we're able to, especially now with Terranode, the conversation goes along a long ways of saying, look, we are, in our opinion, the only enterprise scalable blockchain that can handle these type of transaction volumes and not be a private blockchain, which in our opinion, in a lot of ways is kind of an oxymoron because the whole point of a blockchain is something that's trustless. And so if it's private, then I'm relying upon somebody who can conspire. And one other thing though, well, we don't get asked about proof of stake. We just simply, they ask us how much the transactions cost, how much profit can they make utilizing our blockchain, how much efficiency is it going to give them, is it going to save them time, money, and energy? And so I think that's the biggest thing that people want to know. But I did want to point out, though, something about the proof of work. What I love is, it is that co-opetition, right? So it's constantly having this battle between miners saying, I want to be the one that gets to produce this block. I want to get these transaction fees, but I want to give it at the most scalable and cheapest possible version so we could just continue to just increase millions of transactions a second. That subsidy is going to disappear, and then we could have a robust ecosystem. And I think that's really important about that paradigm of that small world network.
Jake, just on the question of public and private blockchain, because I'm slightly confused about yours because it's sort of private in a way, but it's in public. We can go and look on a block explorer.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
Yeah, I think it often confuses people because we have that vetted node process, but it's a permissioned public blockchain. So you can think of it like the Square.
Anyone can go and have a look.
Public open, public permission. So the permission component just means that the node production side is like vetted. Everything else, read, write, broadcast whatever you want, build dApps, like we've got, NFT communities, meme coins, almost said the naughty version, right. Etc. Like that part is perfectly open and public. So we did come from a consortium which was a private blockchain, which exactly as you know, like the value prop of that, we soon came to realize like you're missing out on a whole world of opportunity through collaboration and all that good stuff. So yeah, then we became a public permissioned chain. So a hybrid, again, hybrid on hybrids.
We've got to bring this thing to an end. I just want to end by showing you something that I found in my house yesterday, in fact. It's The Economist, and the headline is "The Trust Machine, How the Technology Behind Bitcoin Could Change the World." And basically, the editorial that week is all about how you may have heard all sorts of horrible things about Bitcoin, but blockchain is the technology behind it, and that's going to change the world. Well, I mean, in a way, that's good news, and I think we agree with that, but this was October the 31st, 2015.
Wow.
So maybe this debate will be carrying on for another few years, but I'd like to thank very much Kevin, Jake, and Greg for great contributions.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.